In this video, we'll be building an interactive accordion component in Figma, one that could be leveraged in an enterprise-level design system, and one that uses all the latest techniques and tooling in Figma. Techniques like nested auto layout, tooling like variables driven by interactivity and expressions. So let's get started with a 30-second preview of the component we'll be building. In this preview, let's take a look at the accordion component. Each accordion item opens, and by clicking an accordion item, it will collapse any open items. To accomplish this, we will be binding local variables to component properties. We'll be building an atomic component comprised of an accordion title with 4 variants, an accordion panel. These will be combined to create our accordion item with 2 variants, and then our accordion item instances of this component will be used to create our accordion component. So let's get started. First thing we're going to do is create some text. We're going to use the text tool and just drop some text in the middle of the screen. We'll type out accordion title for the time being. And with this frame selected, we will right click and add to auto layout. So we're going to wrap this in an auto layout frame. If you don't know what auto layout is and how it emulates the document object model of a web browser, now is a good time to watch a video that does a deep dive on auto layout. It is the most important tool in Figma for building design systems, for building UI and UX and interactive prototypes that scale and are maintainable. It's the most important feature in Figma. So if you're not using auto layout at this point, you need to learn it. It is extremely important. So we can also use the shortcut Shift A. We're going to wrap this frame, this text frame, in a auto layout frame. And we are going to rename this frame accordion title. And you'll see as this video goes, I will be renaming layers to keep my workspace tidy, to make sure things are semantic for other designers that use these components, and also for handoff to engineers. You want to keep things tidy and semantic. I'm going to call this text layer just title now. And I'm going to set a background of white on this auto layout frame. The default is white. We'll keep this white and black for now, and we'll come back and add some styles. So the text will just make 000 black. And this is just so we can construct this component and visualize. So now we need to have some kind of indication in the UI that this is a accordion that can be expanded and collapsed. A lot of times you'll see a plus minus or a chevron used. There's a lot of resources for sourcing SVGs, vectors, icons. I won't get into that in this video, so I'm just going to go to another project and grab a chevron. What I will do, and I've copied that from this other file, I'm going to drop it into a frame. You would generally want this to come from an asset library that is a representation of your design system. And you would have maybe a frame that has all of your icons. I'm going to paste that here just to kind of have the same feel of having an asset library that all the teams can access, all your designers can access. So I'm going to drop this chevron here. I'm going to right click and set it up as a component. So create component, and that will now be available in my assets under a folder of icon. I'll have the chevron and any other icons that I might need for this project. But once again, you would want that to live in a asset library in Figma, not in your local file. So now I come over here and I can drop that chevron in. So I can come in and drop this instance of the chevron, and you'll see because we're using auto layout, it nicely lays out to the right of my text layer. You'll see an accordion title. I have auto layout, so I have my title and then the icon, and you'll see because I'm using auto layout that nicely lays out. If I want to move it to the front, I could do that. I used the left and right arrow to do that, so you can move things around really nicely. This is why auto layout is Extremely important for mastering Figma. What I'm also going to do is set a width on this accordion title to 320 pixels. And you'll see that the two frames inside of my auto layout frame are centering. What I want is, and that's the default behavior here, I want the alignment to be on the left, and then I want this accordion title to fill the space available, which would push the icon to the furthest right. So I'm going to set this to fill, which pushes the icon, and this is exactly what I want. Now as a designer, I want to decide if I want this. Do I want this to break to another line, or do I want it to truncate? And I'm going to have this truncate so it stays on one line, and if someone is using this accordion at the 320 width, it will truncate when it runs out of available space in the auto layout frame. So we can do that by coming over to the text panel, clicking this overflow menu, and getting into the truncate text, which is a newer feature from Figma. And you'll see that now I kind of have this ghost representation of the second line here when I'm actively editing the text layer, but when I click out, I get a nice truncate. And I'm going to change this back to accordion title, but now I know that as this component evolves, it will truncate properly when it runs out of available real estate. And that would be the case if I had, 2 icons, 3 icons in here. This will truncate properly. So let's get rid of that. All right, so we have our accordion title. We are now at a point where we want to set this up as a component and start looking at different properties that we might need for this component. Properties like state, the interactive state of the component, like hover, focus, things like that. And we might want to also set up a property for expand and collapse as well. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to click the accordion title frame and right click and go create component. Now I have a component. I'm going to come over here to properties, and I am going to click this create component property and create my first variant. And the first variant, it will default property 1 and set it default. What I want to do is say property 1 is going to be state, and we can leave that as default. That's fine. So state default, and I want to create a second state, and I'm going to click this add variant, which will create a copy of this first variant. And the difference between this variant and this variant is I'm going to set up state of hover on this one. And the difference between here and here is maybe I want the background color to change to give some feedback to the user that the accordion, the whole accordion title component is clickable. So we'll go ahead, and now we want to introduce some actual styles from our design system. So I'm not going to get into setting up typography and your base foundational styles. I'm just going to grab this frame that I created that has just kind of some color palette on here using a sequential color palette that I built using Chroma.js. I also have kind of a neutral. I have some text styles, just some simple text styles that I could grab. And then these are spatial tokens using a 8 pixel base and having one rem equal 16 pixels. So I'm going to run with that. You would generally have this somewhere in a foundational, in your design system somewhere, or you would have it agreed upon with your engineers, with your other designers, that this is going to be your foundational tokens. So what we want to do is first look at color. I'm just going to grab some of these colors really quick. I'm going to use this, this color here. I'm going to add in as a variable that I can use. So we're going to go and create a local variable by having nothing selected in my workspace. I get a panel here for local variable that I can click, and it allows me to create variables. I'm going to create my first variable. I'm going to call this collection, and you can rename. I'll call this colors, and we'll create a variable in here for color. We'll call this primary, and we'll say this is primary 50. So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. We'll say this is primary 50, and this is the color this is the color we want to set for primary 50. I'm not going to set all these up. I just need a few colors just to build out this component set. So we have that in there. We'll also grab some neutral colors. Let's grab the lightest and set that to another variable called neutral 10 equal to this hex that I just copied. We'll also grab this, create a color called neutral 20, and let's also grab this here to use as our font color. So create variable, and we'll call this neutral 90. This is just a quick way to set up some colors. You would need a much more robust palette to build out all your design system components. I'm going to close this out, and now these colors will be available, so I can change the accordion title to the neutral 90 and have this set to neutral 90. I'll update the icon too, but what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to update it from the source of truth here. This icon will make this neutral 90, and that will cascade the update to here and here, and we'll have these both as neutral 90. The hover state, I want the background to change to a light gray instead of using white, so I'm going to use this neutral 10 as the background color. We're also going to want to set up some text styles just really quick. So I like the body medium size for this. So let's set this up as a text style. I can click this menu here. I have no text styles. What I'm going to do is click the plus here, and I'm just going to call this body medium. And this will be available as a style locally. Once again, you'll want this at a more global level if you're building out a design system, but we're going to have this live locally for the sake of this prototype. So let's change the text style here to use body medium, and text style here as well, body medium. All right, now we can safely move forward with this component, knowing we have some text styles that will help support our component as it kind of grows. What we're going to do is we're also going to want a property for expanded and collapsed. The best way to do this would be to create a copy of this variant, and we want the state to be default, but in this case, the chevron is going to rotate 180 degrees to point upward to indicate that in this state, the accordion panel is open and the user can click the accordion title to collapse it. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a second property to this accordion title by clicking the plus here. We're not going to use a Boolean, we're going to use a variant, but we're going to set up a variant as a Boolean. So we're going to go variant, and we're going to say expanded. Sometimes you'll see in a design system this will be like is expanded, or they'll use an icon. You want to have a common language in your design system for all your properties. So keep that in mind. You want to have a library that kind of collects all the different properties so your components are consistent. So name expanded, and the default value will be false. So we're going to kind of set up a Boolean, but as a variant. And you'll see how that is a powerful way to set up a property. So we'll create this property. We have false, which the only change here is the chevron is flipped. And then I also want to create a hover on my, so let me take a step back. This is going to be expanded false. This is going to be the first variant where it is expanded true. And then I'm going to create a copy of this, and I'm going to change the background color to that down here to that neutral 10. This will be my variant for the property of state hover. And you don't have to type that. There is a drop down that gives you all of your values, and expanded true. So that's all set up. So now we have 4 variants. And I want to go ahead and set up the interactivity between these variants. So when I go to this prototype tab, I have interaction, and I can click here, and I want the while hovering action to change the variant to the state of hover. And what that will do is when I'm viewing this prototype, when I hover the accordion title, it will flip the variant to this one on hover. And then when I mouse out of this variant, it'll flip it back. And you can shortcut this just by grabbing this connective tissue here and dragging a noodle down to, but it'll default to on click. So you just want to set that to while hovering. And now's probably a good time to start testing. So we want to make sure that this accordion title atomic part or base component is in good shape before we move forward to building out the other pieces we'll need for this accordion title, for this accordion. So I'm going to set up a frame. And in this frame, I'm just going to call this test. I'm also going to set up a starting point for interactions. So when I launch prototype mode, it knows that I want to always start from this frame, and I don't want it to start on any other frames like this frame that I brought in here or this frame here. So I'm going to set set a flow starting point. It'll default and say flow 1. That's probably fine. I'm just going to call it test to be consistent. When I click this, I get a preview of this white frame. What I'm going to do is actually open this in a new tab. I find that's a better way to view these prototypes in the actual in another tab. And I am going to drag just this, or I'm going to copy just this accordion title instance into here, hit paste, and I'm going to come into here and see the interactivity is working. And when I change this to the expanded state, you can see this flips, and I should get that interactivity in there. So this is looking pretty good. I have the first piece of this accordion set up. The next thing I want to build is the actual panel that houses the content. And we're going to do that the same way. We're going to set a text layer. We're going to say, this is some content that will live in the accordion when expanded. What we're going to do here is same approach. We are going to right click, add auto layout. We now have an auto layout frame. We're going to give it a background color of white. We're going to give it the text color of our neutral 90. And we're going to set this frame to match the accordion title width of 320. And you're going to see that this is now going off the screen in both directions. We're going to change this to fill. So it fills the available space with respect to the padding on all sides, and it will break to the next line. And that's what we want. So we're going to call this accordion panel, I think is a good name. And we're going to go ahead and set this up as a component too. I don't know if we're going to actually set up properties on this yet, but we want this as a part of the larger accordion that we're going to build. So now we have an accordion title, we have an accordion panel. I do want to also add some correct spatial, some correct spacing into my component. I should have done that at an earlier point. Let's go ahead and set this up right now, but I'll show you how that's done. You would probably want these to come from variables. So you would have these as variables in your shared design system variables. I'm going to just hard code these in. So I'm really just going to set up, I need 1 rem of space, and I'll probably use that half rem of space, that 8 pixel. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select these 4 accordion titles. which all have the same auto layout properties right now. I'm going to change this to the space between, and you'll see the indication here where space between the title and the icon. I want this to be a half rem or 8. And then I want the padding on all sides to be 16 to be consistent. And I want that same spacing in my accordion panel. Actually, let's use 24. Let's do 1.5 rems to make this a little bit different. So here we're going to set this to 24 and 24. So now we have 300 pixel wide. We have 24 on all sides. And the space between, we'll set that to 0. We're probably not going to have a second element inside of this frame, but let's just set that to 0 for as a best practice. So now what we're going to do is we are going to place an instance of accordion title with an instance of accordion panel to create an accordion item. So let's grab the accordion title. Let's paste it down here. Let's grab the panel and paste it right below. We're going to select both of these items and use Shift A to wrap it in an auto layout frame. Once again, we're going to call this accordion item. This represents a single accordion item in a larger accordion component, which might have many items. And we are going to right click and set this up as a component. This atomic component is composed of a accordion title and accordion panel to create this atomic accordion item. We'll probably have two states here. We'll have the open and closed, or expanded and collapsed. Because we're already using expanded, true and false, to be consistent, we're going to do the same thing here and not come up with a new convention of, open, true, false, or having a drop down with an open with two values, an open and a close. We're going to try to not create new properties that are pretty much doing the same thing, right? So an accordion item, we are going to set up a property, our first variant, and this variant, the property is going to be expanded, just like we did in the accordion title. And in this case, it'll be expanded. We'll set up an expanded false, and then we'll set up a second variant, and this is going to be expanded true. And when we're in the expanded false variant, we want the accordion title to be expanded false as well, which it is, and we want this to not be visible. So we will just hide this. There's a few ways you could do that. I'm just going to hide the panel so it doesn't show. And then when my expanded is true, I want the accordion title to also be expanded. So I get this chevron flipped up, and I want the content to show. So what I can do now is set up the interaction on accordion item. When a user clicks on the accordion title, I want to change the variant to the expanded. And then I also want to set the opposite. So when I click the accordion title here, I want to close and set it to expanded. Let me talk a little bit about state management really quick as we test out this component. I'm going to paste this into here, and you'll see that when I run this prototype, it is now working, but the icon is not flipping 180 degrees. The accordion title component is correctly switching between this variant and this variant, but what Figma's trying to do is remember it's holding the state of your chevron between here and here and not respecting that change. That's a feature that Figma has by default. I think for building out complex mobile apps, they thought that was the best approach to have that on by default. I find it pretty frustrating. There's a few hacks you can do to override that, but Figma has also natively built in a reset component state option that you can check. So I'm going to do that on both of these. What that's going to do is not try to hold the state, which is what I would like by default. So we're going to check both of those. And now if I go back into my test frame here and I click R to restart or reset, refresh the frame, when I click, I now get that accordion title change. Chevron flips up and down. So we're looking pretty good now. What we want to do is now set up a component that has 3 accordion items to create a accordion that has 3 accordion items in it. So I'm going to grab a instance of my accordion item. I'm going to duplicate that twice. What I'll do is select all of these and right click, add to auto layout. And I am going to zero this out. I want it to be 0. So I'm going to go 0, 0, and 0. And this is going to be my accordion. And we'll set it to 3 for now. We're going to right click and create component. So now this is going to be my final accordion component. And this accordion component, if I work my way up the atomic chain here, we have these atomic components of accordion title and accordion panel that are combined in a thing called an accordion item. And then accordion item is 3 instances of accordion item, kind of create my base accordion component. You generally don't want to have too many base components or parts in a design system, but if you need interactivity in a component like here and here, I need to set these up as their own components in order to create those interactive points. If I wanted to have a interaction where when I hover on the chevron, maybe I get a color change or a background circle behind the chevron, I would have to set this up as its own component. So a rule of thumb for me is generally, if I need interactivity, I'll set up a base component to prototype out that interactivity and then pull it into a higher component. So we now have our accordion component set up. Let's bring this instance into here, paste it, and let's test it out. So I can click on the first item, I can click on the second item, and the third item. This is going off screen. Let me just pull it up here, and these work, and they collapse. Let's say we wanted to have it so only one could be open at any point in time. Well, now we're getting into a more complicated interactivity because we need to use variables and we need to use an expression to do that. And I'll show you how to do that. At this point, you have an accordion that works. If you want to create something that's a little bit more true to form, let's say one panel expanded at any point in time. Let's say that's kind of a decision that was made. The way that we would build that is we would need to set up a local variable to capture the expand collapse status of each accordion item. So what I want to do is set up 3 variables that will hold the Boolean values for these 3 items. I'm going to set up my local variables. I have my colors that I've already set up. Let me create a new collection and call this components. I'm going to create a Boolean variable. I'm going to create 3. The first one's going to be called accordion item 1 with the default value of false. I'm going to duplicate this twice to get an accordion item 2, accordion item 3, and I am going to use these variables. I'm going to bind this property to that variable by clicking the assign variable option here, and I can bind to accordion item 1, click this one, accordion item 2, click this one, accordion item 3. And to test that, I will go back to my local variables, and when I turn these on or off, I can see that I'm now changing the accordion item instance property to also be true and false. This is going to be important for setting up our interactivity. So when I come into this accordion item 1. I want to change this interaction to be on click if 2 or 3 are open. Let's go ahead and close those first. So I'm going to go to set variable of 2, and it'll default for your expression. It'll say 2, and you'll say, let's set that to false. We're going to set up another one for set variable 3 to false. And then I also want to change to the expanded state on accordion item 1. So I can change this to expanded, and I'm using the change to method as opposed to set variable, because I also have access to things like smart animation, and if I'd like to do some kind of animation there, I also have that state management option, so I can ensure that I'm not getting that that bug that we saw earlier. So I'm going to set reset component state, and now I want to test this. And to test this, I will come back into my test prototype here. Let's load this up. And what I should see is that when this second accordion is expanded, when I click the first item, it should change this to false. It should change this to false, but it's already false. And then it should open up this first item. So let's try that. I'm going to click, and we can see that's exactly what happens. So this proof of concept is working. So I'm going to go ahead and set that up on accordion item 2. Now that I know that it works, I'm going to follow the same approach where I first want to set variable accordion item 1 to false. I want to also set accordion item 3 to false. And then I want to change to the expanded state and reset the component state. And let's do that one more time. Interaction, on click. In this case, we're going to go set variable 1 to false. Let's set variable 2 to false. And let's change to the expanded variant and reset component state. So now you can see I have these 3 all set up. And let's test this component out. I'm going to click R to reset to ensure I'm pulling the latest changes to those components. And let's expand out 2. Let's expand out 1. Let's expand out 3. Let's expand out 1. We could see that they're all working. This is great. And I can close all 3 at the same time. So now let's do one more small tweak. I want to have a little bit more differentiation in the UI between these items. Let's add a border on our accordion item on the top. There's a couple ways I could do that. I could add it into this more atomic accordion title, or I could add it to the item itself. Let's select these 3 and add it into this accordion title base component. So we're going to go back into design. We're going to add a stroke here, and we are going to click the plus, and we're going to use the color we have. We go into libraries. I'll get access to that neutral 20, and I want that just to be on the top. So I'm going to click the strokes per side and say just on the top, and you can see that that gets reflected here. It's hard to see on the black background, but it gets reflected here, and most importantly, it gets reflected here. So when I go back into here, you can see I need to click R to refresh the prototype, and now I have that nice border on the top of each accordion title. All right, well, that's it. That is creating a interactive accordion using these atomic parts to build out our interactive and all of our different states and statuses. And then we assembled our accordion title with our accordion panel to create an accordion item. And then we took 3 instances of accordion item to create our accordion component. And that component is driven by variables that use interactive expressions to control the state.